And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Tom Vasel.
Hey everybody! Today we're taking a look at a game called Captain Sonar. Now Captain Sonar had me super excited for two reasons. One, it's from Manago, and I just really like games from Manago. They're usually games that I really get on board with. But the other reason is because of these. This here is a gigantic shield. It's actually this big, and that is one of two shields that comes in the game. Essentially, this game is for two to eight players, and you're going to put these shields in the middle of a table, basically between two teams of players. Each team is running a submarine and trying to shoot the other submarine. Think battleship, but much more than that, as players are using erasable markers and trying to keep track, and it's a real-time game as players are going back and forth trying to find the other players. That sounded fascinating to me. Let's take a look. So in Captain Sonar, you're going to have four boards that are given to the four different people who are on each team. If there's less than four people on team, some of the positions are combined. So here we have the engineer, who is going to get a map of the sub here and different sections of the sub. We have here the first mate. They basically have the different operating systems of the sub. They also keep track of the sub's damage. The whole goal of this game is to do 4 points of damage to the opponent's sub. Then we have the radio operator and the captain. Both of them are going to get a map. This map here is called Alpha Map, but the game goes all the way. It has Bravo maps and all the way up to the E maps, which in this we got Delta, Charlie, and Echo. So there's different maps that you can have to play different styles of games. You just have to make sure that both captains and both radio operators have the same maps. Now these boards are double-sided because on one side there is a board for if you're playing turn by turn, but the way you're supposed to play is real time, so you'll be using these boards here. So over the course of a game, each captain is going to simultaneously pick a spot on the board where their submarine is going to start. And then both players are going to say dive at the same time, and they're going to be shouting out orders so that their own team can hear it, and then the opposing team can hear it. So for example, I might say north. And there's a little compass here so you remember what north, south, east, and west are. So I'll say north, and I'll make a line that moves up there. Now, as the captain is moving, the captain cannot run into islands. They also cannot run into their own line as they're moving around. So maybe I'll say north. Then you have to go to the engineer and the first mate, who have to say okay before you can go on. The first mate simply is going to look at the different systems on the ship, and they can pick any one of them. So they might pick mine, and they put an X in that box. When mine has 3 X's in here, for example, they can say mine's ready. All right, that's pretty simple. The engineer, they listen to whatever direction is set. So in this case, it was north, and they have to pick one of these circles here and cross it off. So they might do this one here. Now, when they cross off that red system, that means mines and torpedoes don't work. So they have to announce that to the first mate and or captain. The first mate's job, which is not that difficult, marking off the things here, is to communicate between the engineer and the captain what's going on. So until this is cleared out, those markers will not work. So there's different systems that you can cancel each time north is said. Now, if every single system in the same section gets an X in, then everything clears out. Not just that section, but the entire board will clear out. However, the submarine will also take a point of damage. If you'll notice there's some lines here on the board, if you manage to get an X through all the ones that are connected in the same system, then that's great. Then you simply just cross those off like that, and that system clears out. So you might use these lines to clear out different systems. There's also radiation here, which does nothing if you cross it off. Great. But if you cross off every radiation on the board, then the same thing happens. You erase all X's, and the submarine takes a point of damage. The submarine can also surface, and the captain will say surface, and then you can cross off all your X's. However, there's two things that happen when you surface. First, when you surface, you have to tell the opponent's team, I'm in sector 5, wherever you are at that point in time. You get to erase your line so you can start drawing again. And then starting with the engineer has to take one section of your submarine and draw in the white lines as fast as they can. They hand it to the next person who draws in their lines like that. Oh, then you have to initial too inside here like this. And so you go back and forth till all the sections are done. You show it to your opponent to make sure you've gone through the lines. If not, you have to start over again. And then you can erase that, erase all your X's, and the submarine can go back down. However, during that time frame, your opponent can keep going. They can keep taking actions. So submarines are doing these different things. They're shouting north, okay, okay. So I might be here, and I say north, okay, okay. And then I'll say east, okay, okay. North, east, south, east, etc. Now, as you shout these out, the opponent's radio operator has their own thing, and they're trying to figure out where you are. And to do that, they have this transparency, and so they'll hear you go north, east, south, east. And so they're drawing on this transparency, and they're moving that around the board, trying to figure out where that could possibly fit between the islands. So they're moving this around to try to pinpoint your position. And they're going to do different things. They're working with the captain. They'll say, Captain, I'm pretty sure they're over here, because as this line gets bigger and more, all over the place, there's going to be fewer places that it can fit on the board, especially with the islands on the board. You also have these different systems you can use. You have the drone here. If once the drone is full, and as long as it's not crossed off on the engineer sheet, the captain can raise his fist and say, launch your drone. Whenever you launch one of these systems, all play stops until it's done. The captain will ask the opponent, are you in sector 3? And the opponent has to say yes or no. You can also use sonar. With sonar, the opponent has to tell you either the row or the column that they're in, or the sector. So 2 out of those 3 things. One of them must be true, and 1 must be false. So those are things that will help you narrow down where your opponent is. Once your mines are filled up, if that system is working, you can erase those X's to drop a mine. Now you gotta be careful when you drop a mine on the map. You just place it there. You can't run into your own mines. You keep track. It's somewhere adjacent to you, and you have to say it, you're deploying a mine, so your opponent radio operator and everyone else is trying to figure out where that mine is. At any point, you can stop play and detonate the mine. You say exactly where it is. If it's in the exact spot where your opponent's submarine is, they'll take 2 points of damage. If it's adjacent to them, they will take 1 point of damage. Torpedoes are very similar. When you have torpedoes, you can say you launch a torpedo. You can shoot a torpedo up to 4 spaces from where your submarine currently is. Same thing, you say where it hits. Your opponent can then either have to say direct hit, where they take 2 damage, or indirect hit, where they take 1 damage each. Finally, the last 2 things you have here are silence. Once you fill that up, you can say we're doing silent running, which allows you to move up to 4 spaces in a straight line right away. And you secretly tell your team the direction rather than the opponent, so it's a way to escape from the other people. And then there's scenario. I believe 1 or 2 of the maps have scenario things that can be launched by doing the scenario thing here, which is going to be different, and in most of the maps doesn't mean anything at all. And so that's really the game. You're just going to be going back and forth, shouting out commands. Things are going to be changing, going back and forth. And eventually one team is going to win by causing 4 damage to the opponent's submarine. Wow. All right, let's start with my biggest negative about the game, and that is the fact that it really is best with 8 players, 4 versus 4. You may not have 8 players all the time, so that might be more difficult. 6 is not so bad because the person who plays the captain also plays the first mate. The first mate does the least, at least it seems on the surface, but really what the first mate is there for, not just to mark those systems off, that's not that hard, but the first mate is there to facilitate communication. They're the one working with the engineer and saying, Captain, this system's down, we got this. The engineer's sitting there trying to figure out, okay, I need to have these systems marked off, and I can connect these, I don't want to do this. And they kind of have a job that they're working on. And in fact, the engineer's job is good, but when the game goes down to 4 players, one person is the captain, first mate, and engineer. Whoever's the radio operator, that's still what they do. And I can't even imagine playing this with 2. I have not tried it. I just don't think it would be even worthwhile to try. Like I said, so 4 versus 4. Now, if you get that together, this game is amazing. I mean, amazing. This is a convention game. This is a game, I played it and I was like, let's play again. Let's play again. Then when the people wanted to play something else, I went and taught it to some other people because I was so excited about this game. I love the concept. Now, the game is kind of a mix between a deduction game and a real-time game. And it's this clear sheet and the radio operator, which I find super fascinating. As you're listening to the direction shouted by your opponent, and then you're moving around in this map trying to figure out where they are, using sometimes the sonar and things to kind of narrow it down. That's a neat concept. The engineer is kind of intuitive how that works. And as you're playing and you're drawing the line, you're like, oh, this is kind of like playing Snake or Centipede. As you're doing these different things, it all just works together. Each person's job feels very distinct, and yet you are definitely working together as a team. Now, the game comes with a turn-by-turn where I say north, okay, and then you go back to the opponent, and then you take your shots and stuff. And that is a good way to learn the game. In fact, I highly recommend you learn the game that way. But once you go real time, you will never go back. The real time is so much better. And I know that some people don't necessarily like real time games because they're frenzied and stuff, but here it's not so bad. It's not like one team's gonna be so much faster than the other because you have 4 people on your team. Now, if you're working together like a really synchronized oiled unit, then yes, you will be faster than the other team, but it's not that bad because you'll be like north, and then they're like, okay, and then you're going south. Wait, I can't go there. I need to move here. Oh, I gotta go here. And your radio operator's like, hang on, I'm trying to figure out where they are. Okay, we're in position to shoot the torpedo. And when a torpedo is shot, it's just like, stop! And the torpedo is shot, like, how did you know where we were? It's so exciting and interesting. The components are cool. These markers come, your typical markers that you get with the game, and they have erasers at the end of them, and the box actually comes with extra erasers because you'll be erasing a lot. And I will probably eventually be putting in nicer markers because I do plan to keep this game, and I do plan to bring it to conventions and play it there because it is such a great game for that situation. There are 5 different maps included with the game. I like that. It's not even that big of a deal. I could play on the same map probably 6 times in a row. But having different maps, there's fewer islands on some of them, so you need to use sonar more often because it's easier for the submarines to drive around in circles and have a hard time figuring out where they are. But wow, guys, I can't explain to you how much I just was enthralled with this game. I do understand the limitations. The limitations are it really works good with a bunch of players, and you want to play somewhere where people aren't going to be disturbed by your shouting a little bit because there is some shouting. The captain needs to be clear, north, south, so that your opponent can hear him. And there's going to be a little bit of a be courteous to the other team. And when they say stop, everything stops. But when does your submarine surface? That's exciting. As you're drawing those lines around the submarine, that's a silly thing, but it really is that tension, like, hurry. And the opponent's like, okay, they're doing that. Now's our chance to catch up to them and shoot that torpedo. It's like, where exactly did they drop those mines? I know they dropped a mine here. We're almost on top of their mine. Let's not go that direction. Great fun. Really like this one. It's coming out at Gen Con 2016. If you have a big group of players or something that you want to take to meetups where there's a lot of people, this is one of the coolest games I played in this regard. It gives us some similarities to Dice Duels, which is a game I really liked from Stronghold Games, designed by Jeff Engelstein, where you're rolling dice and moving ships around the board. They have a very similar vibe to them. I like both. Dice Duels, I'm rolling dice quite a bit. That one's a lot of fun. But I think the edge is to this one, if only because I like this sheet and moving it around and trying to figure out logically where the opponent is. And you also get into that submarine mode. And it's a little bit less frenzied, maybe, than Dice Duels. And I think some people will enjoy that, too. They're both great games, though. So 6 of one, half dozen of the other. But the theme here comes through very strongly. It's the great components. It works really well. I want to play it right now. Cat's Captain Sonar. Dice Tower Judgment into my collection.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.
Shut the door!